Big coal is back in the news tonight. Usually when the very profitable mining and sale of the 19th century's favorite energy source grabs headlines, it's because in the world of carbon footprints, big coal is Sasquatch. Well, tonight it's less direct, but no more flattering than that. We start with an update from the University of Kentucky. You'll recall that we reported on Monday that a man named Joseph W. Kraft III is a huge fan of the University of Kentucky Wildcat basketball team. He's also the head of a company called Alliance Coal. Mr. Kraft offered to bundle together a donation to the University of Kentucky of $7 million in order to build a new dorm to house the men's basketball team. His only condition was that he wanted the word coal included in the actual name of the new dorm. How embarrassing. The university's Board of Trustees nevertheless met on Tuesday to discuss the offer. And yeah, Kentucky's men's basketball team will soon live in the Wildcat Coal Lodge. Sounds homey. You get a little respirator with every room. The board approved the name by a vote of 16-3. The 3 dissenting votes came from the faculty representative, the staff representative, and the student body president. Students were not allowed to speak formally at the meeting, and when about 30 of them stood up to protest, most of the board, including the university's president, just got up and left, walked right out of the room. Put that in your stovepipe and smoke it, you meddling kids. Big coal, or at least its paid lobbyists, had a tougher time today on Capitol Hill, where a hearing was held to investigate a right-wing lobbying firm called Bonner and Associates. We first reported over the summer about forged letters that Bonner sent to Congress on behalf of the so-called clean coal industry. These letters appeared to come from organizations like the NAACP, the American Association of University Women, and groups representing Hispanics and veterans and senior citizens. They were sent to 3 House Democrats, and they expressed opposition to climate change legislation, supposedly from these community groups. And this was right before a critical vote. The issue is that the letterhead was stolen from these community groups, and the letters were forgeries. The bill did barely pass on June 26th by a vote of 219 to 212. 2 of the Democrats who received these phony letters from the clean coal industry actually voted against the legislation, as the letters suggested that they should. It's since been revealed that Bonner and Associates knew on June 22nd that its employee had sent the fake letters. That's 4 days before the vote. So why didn't the firm inform the member of Congress who had been targeted with these forgeries?
The reason we didn't is we felt our first responsibility, a responsibility of our firm as a grassroots firm, was to get to the organizations involved in a very open way and tell them that we, Bonner and Associates, had made this mistake, and that we apologized to these groups directly, and that we, as soon as we had found that this fraud had been committed by this temporary employee, fired that employee. And we should have also, as I look back on it, sir, and as I look forward to the future, should have immediately informed Congress of it at that moment.
Jack Bonner, the president of his eponymous firm, assigning responsibility for misinforming members of Congress to a rogue temp employee. Because, you know, coal flows downhill. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Ed Markey from Massachusetts. He chaired today's hearing into the forged letters. Congressman Markey, thank you very much for taking time to come on the show tonight after such a big day.
No, thank you for having me on.
At your hearing, Mr. Bonner said he took responsibility for the forgeries, but he did repeatedly blame a temp, a rogue temp, for sending those letters. Were you able to figure out today if this was a rogue employee situation or if this was systematically the way these guys operate?
Well, I think the big issue here was that the Coal Coalition and their subcontractors that included Bonner and Associates knew about these letters, knew that they were fraudulent before we ever had this historic vote on the Waxman-Markey Clean Energy Bill on the House floor on June 26th. And yet the congressmen who had been the recipients of the fraudulent letters were never notified that the NAACP, that the American Association of University Women, that veterans groups, that senior groups actually did not oppose the legislation, and in many instances they actually supported it. For example, the NAACP. So Bonner was hired by Hawthorne, and Hawthorne had been hired by the Coal Coalition. And yet all of them knew about the fraud, and none of them told the members of Congress, and it was a squeaker of a vote, 219-212, and without knowing it, we were able to win, but it wasn't because a fraud had not been perpetrated.
Is defrauding Congress a prosecutable offense? What can happen to the Coal Coalition, to the subcontractor, to Bonner and Associates for having done this?
Well, I don't know that, but my own feeling is that I do have a responsibility to ensure that there is a spotlight that is placed upon this legislation because now the Senate is taking up the counterpart legislation to Waxman-Markey, and that is the Kerry-Boxer bill. And I want to make sure that this is a debate that takes place on the facts. The planet is running a fever. There are no emergency rooms for planets, and we have to take action in order to give global leadership, create the green jobs, and back out the imported oil. And we won't be able to do that if we have a fraud perpetrated on the Senate the way it was on in the House, because that vote in the Senate is going to be very close.
In addition to them sort of getting caught for having done this in the House, this goes to the larger issue of whether or not this is an ongoing strategy. These are in an ongoing way, these are the types of tactics that the coal industry and other people opposed to global warming legislation are going to use to try to defeat it. To that end, it's been reported late this afternoon that one of the people testifying today from the Coal Coalition may have committed perjury in your hearing today. He said, "Our organization has never opposed the climate change legislation, the Waxman-Markey bill." I don't think that's true. Is it possible that the committee will be looking further into today's testimony? Could there be perjury prosecutions?
Again, I don't know if that's the case, and it would be premature for me to make any judgment. But the reality is that there was opposition to the legislation. In one of these instances, by the way, one of the letters that was sent was of a deceased woman of a defunct chapter of the American Association of University Women that was sent to a congressman in Virginia who they felt could be persuaded to vote against the legislation. Tom Perriello. He did vote for the legislation, but that just goes to show the extent to which some people would be willing to go in order to block this historic clean energy legislation from passing.
Congressman Ed Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts, chair of the House Select Committee on Global Warming and Energy Independence. Sir, it's great to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.